when she got sick, that phrase and that, like, she would repeatedly say that to me in college, came back to me vividly. And I started really, really, really asking myself, Jeremy, am I really living out my potential? Am I really living out my purpose? Or am I living the life that quote unquote is safe, or that was, mapped out for me, or that I think I coulda, woulda, like I should be living, but it's not really the life I'm created to live.
Join me, Jeremy Swick, on Into the Unknown, a podcast that delves into the personal journeys, stories, and experiences of individuals across diverse professions. As a historian by trade, I firmly believe that our personal histories shape our present and offer valuable insights into our paths ahead. With that being said, let's get into it. On this episode of Into the Unknown, I am joined with a very special guest, Katrina Julia. How are you doing today, Katrina?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much, Jeremy, for having me.
I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me today. I'm really excited to get into this conversation.
Likewise, I'm sure we're going to dive into a lot of different directions, I imagine.
It's one of the fun things about podcasting and learning more about podcasting. I always encourage my fellow podcast hosts to really just actively listen. And a lot of times your guests will take you on the journey and you're just along for the ride, and it's always fun.
And I definitely got that sense from listening to an episode with you and Jessica that you definitely devour and give whoever you're featuring all your attention.
I appreciate that. I always like to kick off the show and talk about the importance of networking. How are we connected?
We are connected via a Facebook group. You posted a invite to be on your show, and I'm on there both as a potential guest and a host. And then you replied the fastest out of anyone.
Hey, I appreciate it. It's funny because I remember that it was like a late night, but it's one of those things where when I think someone's story can coincide with the show's mission, it's always exciting to get them on the show.
Thank you. I received that. Thank you.
And one of the things is before we jump in a little more, I do appreciate, and it's one thing we talked about a little bit ahead of time, was the fact that life happens and both you and I are busy, and it was a little bit of a process for us to find some time, but I do appreciate you making the time.
Well, likewise.
So I want to know a little bit more about you, that comic book issue number one origin story. Who's Katrina?
So Katrina, Katrina's lived 10,000 lives in one. Katrina is currently in the current reinvention process, a multi-passionate entrepreneur, creator, and global traveler on my 44th country. And I've walked through what I've realized over the last 7-ish years, 7 themes of transformation: self-hate to love, devaluing to purity, pain to purpose, corporate to calling, lies to love, bondage to freedom, and fear to faith.
That's incredible. What you mentioned about 7 years ago, you started on this journey. What prompted that?
3 key triggers prompted that. Actually, now that I think about it, it was, oh my God, 14 years ago. It really started in 2011 when I had moved to Atlanta. It was a closer relationship to the creator with my faith. It was alongside that, it was some decisions I made with increased discipline, sober lifestyle, several different things, relationally. And then also one of my best friends, Janelle McCullough, she ended up being diagnosed with cancer and ended up passing away within 3 months of the diagnosis. So that was earth shattering, mind numbing, mind fog, all the things. And one of the key things out of that, because we had been friends, she was like a sister, me, her, and another friend, Angela and Lindsay. Um, she had told me in college, Katrina, you're going to be like Oprah and I'm going to be your Gail. And I was like, you do know that Oprah is African American, right? And she laughed because Janelle actually was African American. She's like, yeah, but I'm talking about the essence and the spirit. And so I hadn't even thought about her saying that for years, like easily over 10 years. But when she got sick, that phrase and that, like, she would repeatedly say that to me in college, came back to me vividly. And I started really, really, really asking myself, Jeremy, Am I really living out my potential? Am I really living out my purpose? Or am I living the life that quote unquote is safe, or that was, mapped out for me, or that I think I coulda, woulda, like I should be living, but it's not really the life I'm created to live. So that all those things triggered like so much.
Katrina, you touched on a really important point. I think it's that idea of, are you living your life to your full potential, or, as you said, your purpose? Because I think a lot of times, for honestly, I've realized most people, it's much easier to do what you call the quote unquote safe. It's going to get that job, that nice paying job. You get the house, you get the mortgage, you get the nice car, you get the bonus, you get all that. And I think for a lot of people that is fulfillment. But I know, at least from personal experience, is it fulfillment? Is it, or are you really just kind of going with what you feel like you're supposed to be doing?
No, absolutely. And to your point, actually, all of that part of like what started into that transformation of those seven themes was I started also remembering I always wanted to inspire through fitness. And through that, I did several triathlons, I did half marathons, I did century rides. However, at that point, after like in the midst of her getting sick and then going through this fog, I actually had signed up to start training to do a fitness competition. Long story short, lost 55 plus pounds, entered into like this whole incredible wellness community and so much more that started to then catapult because of how I felt from the inside out. And a byproduct was the visual result that actually, ironically enough, I didn't even believe until I saw some pictures that I took after a show in Vegas, which is also a whole nother crazy story. But to your point, we don't know what we don't know until we start taking some steps in certain directions.
Couldn't agree more. It's one of those things, as you mentioned on that fitness journey. It's one of those things I always encourage people to find your version of fitness. Of course, we're not all going to be running triathlons and marathons, but I think there's so much good inside of you when you start to work out, when you start to take your health a little more seriously. And as you mentioned, it's not like it's overnight. Sometimes you don't even notice until, as you mentioned, you're looking at photos of yourself and you can't believe that's the same person that that's there right now.
Well, and to your point, even though I had that vision in high school, for years I struggled with weight. And not only that, but I still, even when I did my first century ride, like I still never imagined that, and I still remember being amazed because it's like levels. And I feel like you choose free will, you choose to, what fitness means to you, what wellness means to you at different levels. And I remember at one point even being amazed when one friend was telling me that another fitness competitor, which I wasn't then yet, that she didn't cheat, she didn't drink alcohol, she didn't eat sweets. And back then I did. And for me, back then, that version of Katrina was like, like, of course, I had seen bodybuilders and stuff online, and in real life, but still, that version of me was like mind blown versus the version of me now, like it's my normal. But there was years in between that, like over a decade.
It really is, and as you mentioned, it's years, and it's those building blocks. Having multiple careers, for example, while you might completely shift or pivot your focus, there's always going to be those skills and experiences that you learned, and that kind of help get you to that next level.
100%. And the same things apply to your point with money, with business. It's like building blocks and things like it's almost like sometimes blinders being taken off. And, or I believe also like nothing is ever wasted. So the foundations of things I went through from, childhood to elementary to middle school to like I remember specific project management skills where I would organize stuff when I was in middle school, like my outfits that like, even though I don't use project management for that, but that was like a building block. Then college, grad school, corporate America, all those into entrepreneurship and then continuing education. Like I believe as an entrepreneur, the education doesn't stop depending on how much you truly want to grow from every level.
I couldn't agree more. And it's one of those things, as you mentioned, as we were talking about, is kind of breaking that mold. You mentioned you went to undergrad and then grad school, and then you entered corporate. Take me through that journey and kind of how you got to the next level as we're talking.
So, in high school, it was a given to me, like, I'm going to college, like, period, point blank. I was born in Poland. I'm a byproduct of two immigrant parents. My dad is Bulgarian, and I'm the first one. And I was born there, but still came here when I was, what, almost two. So it was a given. Like my parents thought, like many immigrant parents, that like, oh, the solution to poverty and everything else is you go to college, you get a degree, and then like you're quote unquote set for life. And it's like, yes, but no. So thought I was going to go to law school. Passionate about many, many, many things. However, I went first to University of Houston, and then I remember visiting Sam Houston State University with the intention of focusing on a pre-law degree, and going like the criminal justice route, and whatnot. I've done a lot of different things, like in fraud as well, like through my corporate career. And so, in that vein, they were like, "Well, if you want to go to law school, you should really get an English degree or a poli sci degree." And I was like, thought about it, and I said, "I love to write regardless. So I think this will be a really good step for me in communication, no matter what avenue I go." And so ended up getting an English degree, went a couple different directions with education with minors. So I ended up triple minoring in technical writing, psychology, and Spanish because, again, I didn't want to waste the effort I put into different things when I transferred. I had an amazing, amazing, amazing college experience at Sam Houston once I transferred. I co-founded an organization, Millennium Models, with Janelle, the angel I now mentioned in heaven, and Angela. It's still in existence today. We are very, very proud of it. We ended up funding a male and female scholarship pageant, a reading program, um, different other fundraisers on campus, different educational programs for males and females. It was an acronym, Making Optimum Differences, or is an acronym in everyone's lives at SAM. And then when I was graduating, I worked at a credit union all through undergrad, so a lot of banking background as well. And when I was graduating, that was circa around one of the times that the market crashed. And so I had an offer for a mutual fund company that then paused hiring. And I still had the job at the credit union. And I thought to myself, okay, I can continue looking, or I can keep working here. They'll pay for even half my education, even if I stay part time, and continue on my journey and get a master's degree. So I got an MBA in management, finished that up, did several projects with the credit union, thought about, do I want to stay here and grow? In the midst of that, interviewed several different companies and ended up landing by chance, not by chance. Walked in the mall one day, went to go to Victoria's Secret with limited brands, thought I would focus on a corporate job, but landed at the time, a retail director job. And through that, then I'll give you some bullet points. Through that, then the credit union, Victoria's Secret. Actually, before that, I applied to the NBC Apprentice TV show while I was still at the credit union. Ended up making it to the final round. Ended up not being on season 6, but ended up being chosen to go work in New York, for Mark Burnett Productions for the show. We simulated all the tasks from The Apprentice, and whatnot. So then Victoria's Secret, then several different opportunities through the credit union to ConocoPhillips Oil and Gas, to consulting to companies like Zytax, FuelQuest, implement system implementations, to then ending up working further into oil and gas as well, into a company where I ended up being an accounting manager, after going through 17 different recruiters while I was working on my CPA. So I moved around from Houston to Oklahoma to New York, back to Houston. So also geographically, always traveled a ton, in different ways, but not like now. And then fast forward to then when I was at the accounting manager role, the parent company at the time that was based in Atlanta, they had me on so many different projects with the subsidiaries and whatnot. And one thing led to another, where I had applied for a project management role in Atlanta, but I didn't ended up getting that. And then out of nowhere, but not out of nowhere, the CFO messaged me and said, "Hey, I am looking for a chief audit executive, and we're planning on taking the company public, and your name got thrown in the hat because of what you've done with the subsidiary and whatnot." And I said, "Amazing, thank you, I appreciate it. Yes, I'd like to throw my name in the hat." And he let me know they're interviewing people, etc. And I knew like it was a strong possibility I would be chosen. At the same time, I knew there was amazing people in Atlanta that had those exact positions. So, they flew me out to interview me. I was chosen, relocated to Atlanta, ended up being helping the company go public on the debt side. So obviously night and day from all the bright colors you see right now. Wore black suits, black and white outfits, the only female in a male dominated, industry, heavily dominated. Went out to the field so many times. And in the midst of that, I always had side hustles. Even when side hustle wasn't a phrase, it was a phrase for me. Whether it was consulting on business plans, whether it was rolling out of systems, whether it was tech projects, all the things. And so through that, I had already been with the company about a year and a half. They had already told me they were eyeballing me to possibly be a COO for the parent and the three subsidiaries. And in the midst of that, that's when all those things started happening that I told you, moving to Atlanta, the friend getting sick, feeling pulled by purpose. And then the wellness transformation started, and getting growing in my faith and increasing in my faith. And again, three pivots happened. I was talking to my intern. She let me know that I could actually teach at Georgia State University with just a master's. I didn't have to have a PhD. I thought you did. I got a tech project that was ongoing and long term. And I ended up getting a project with someone that had worked with Oprah to build a resort with aquaponics and help him with his business plan out in Arizona. And helping him remotely. I didn't actually get to go. I wish I would have. But in any event, so all of that kind of takes it to the point that I left corporate. So I'll pause there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's as you mentioned, those incredible little steps each time from, thinking you're going to be a lawyer to going that route to just kind of each opportunity. And I think a lot of it is the not saying no, saying maybe, saying yes to opportunities. Because I feel a lot of times people don't take those opportunities because it's across the country or you're moving back and forth. And of course, I'm sure you can attest there is sacrifice to those kind of experiences.
Oh,
You
massive.
you start to realize you might not, I don't know when you started to realize, but you start realizing many of your friends you're not about to have the same kind of life they are. And of course you understand that's okay, but it's also, I'm sure, one of those things that pulls at you at least a little bit.
Absolutely, and to your point, some friends that I thought were gonna be friends for life are not. I still love them, bless them and whatnot. Some friends, it's funny that you mentioned this because a lot of my pull this year, even though I'm traveling the world, has been to stay at co-working, co-living places and or stay longer to connect more, like, deeply in different ways, whether it's creating events or meeting people. And, this year, I was really, really grateful, like, I spent over 4 months in Indonesia and Bali and connected with some amazing communities and created some as well. And then 2 of my best friends, so Angela, the one I mentioned since college, and then Lindsay, I got to spend about a week with them in Texas, which was such an like, they're 2 friends that, like, no matter the distance, no matter the time, no matter if we only text for 6 months, when we see each other again, it's like no time has passed. And, like, and in fact, like, our growth continues to be exponential. And, like, it's my prayer and my wish and my dream, like, everyone experiences at least one friend like that, in their life, because it's a game changer.
Really is. I think friendships are so important, and the more and more I've been reading and learning, is that's difficult for a lot of people as you get past college to really have those real friendships. I've been fortunate. I've played rugby the last 16 years, kind of all over the country. So I've had friends all over, at this point all over the world. And it's funny because we'll go years without talking on a regular basis. Next thing you know, I'm getting an invitation to their wedding. And people laugh because it's like, oh, you haven't talked to them in years. I'm like, yeah, but it's just that different level of friendship and experiences that not everyone gets to have. And so I'm really fortunate. I think you can attest as well as to have those friendships.
No, and to your point, you just reminded me. So one of my intentions for this year was to have more soul sisters. And I met an incredible soul sister, Daisy, in Vietnam in January at a lantern making workshop. And we connected after the workshop. We went on like the boat ride at sunset together, and then connected again for like the full moon festival like the next day and to eat. And then to your point, she invited me to her wedding, whether I come in Zanzibar next year or the portion of the wedding that she does closer to the US. So exactly to your point, it's like when you have those connections, time doesn't matter.
I couldn't agree more. Take me to you're leaving. You're thinking about leaving the corporate job. How do you get into starting to travel?
Oh, that's I'm going to give you a couple bullet points there. So, I've always traveled. I joke, but not joke. It's literally, I was conceived in Bulgaria, born in Poland, in a refugee camp in Italy by 6 months of age, and then in the US by the age of 2 through already 4 countries. So literally, travel was already part of my spirit, my soul, all the things. Then growing up, my mom, especially, she has such a deep love of travel. She always instilled that like in me, especially. My brother loved to travel, but me more so. And my mom is such an incredible storyteller, and she would take us all around Poland, all around Bulgaria, like summers when I was in elementary, middle school. Then later, I continued on the bug. And of course, being in corporate, I had 3 weeks vacation, which in US that's a lot. So I would only use it for travel. I would never call in sick. I was never sick, thankfully, very rarely sick, thankfully. So how that ended up happening and integrating into like where I am now and how I am now is I always knew I wanted a life of freedom, like freedom in all forms: time, expression, location, community, and ultimately financial freedom. Not there yet. The rest of them, yes. And with that being said, I always knew at some point I would travel the world indefinitely. Like I wanted to live out of my suitcase, at least for a period of time, maybe not for the rest of my life, but I knew I wanted to be a nomad. And so when I left corporate, at first, like I mentioned, I was teaching at Georgia State. I was also teaching with the AICPA. So that's when like my consulting company started. So I was traveling quite a bit at the time through the United States because a lot of my teaching gigs and whatnot were at the US. So most of my travel then internationally was national. However, fast forward several years, I knew I wanted to create creator retreats, and I knew I wanted to travel full time. So in 2016, I was attending a nutritional conference and some fitness modeling in LA, and I was going to wait for surfing my first time in Costa Rica at a retreat I was leading that fall. However, I saw some kids that were surfing on the beach in California that made it look so easy. And I thought, oh, no biggie, I'll like do it here. So I was determined to get up on the board the first time. And in California, the waves are very different sometimes, especially in LA, like very like depending on if it's high tide, low tide. I ended up making it up finally after being beat up several times. But in my inexperience and in my moment of indecision when I was up and the board was going forward, and I looked down and saw the water was only about this much, like maybe half a foot, I was afraid to fall backward like the instructor told me. So the momentum kept going. The board flew forward. I fell backward, and I ended up landing on my left fibula and breaking it, spiral fracture. I thought I'd be back up on my feet. I didn't even realize it was fully broken until like the next day, because then I couldn't step on it, and I knew, like, anyway, I went to urgent care. Long story short, I was a lot more in the bed. I couldn't walk around with crutches as much. So I started really focusing on that retreat and influencer retreats and that first Costa Rica retreat. And I started realizing, wait a minute, this on top of full-time travel can really, really, really be an avenue for me. And then fast forward to, ironically, so that happened. The retreat was amazing. I also led a retreat in Cuba. I also have upcoming retreats next year in Bali and Mexico. And fast forward to the pandemic. So I was in Atlanta. I mainly, other than the retreats, was mainly still in the US, still US based, still had that vision of I'm going to travel full time at some point. Hadn't happened yet. And one of my close friends, Silvana, that's from Bolivia, and she's half Bolivian and Peruvian and lives in Atlanta. We went to the park one day, and she, I'd been reading articles about more travel, the passports again, the nomad visas, different things that were happening. And she said, are you renewing your lease when it comes back up again this year? She's like, I know you've talked about this before. Are you thinking about maybe leaving? And it was like a little light bulb, ding, went off. And I was like, wait a minute, she's right. Why should I stay here? And like, I'm already isolated for the most part. Like, my highlight is going to the park and the grocery store. And so many people had varying responses to the pandemic. So I ended up deciding to not renew my lease the end of December 2020, left with a carry on and a backpack to Costa Rica, had points on Delta that I didn't even know I had. So I had a free ticket to Costa Rica. The comparison of cost of living to so many countries, especially when you travel hack and book for the month, is like 10% to 50% of the cost of living now in the US, not to mention the nature and the adventures. So I left the end of 2020, went through that year, 3 continents, 10 countries. And then into the following year, kept traveling, but then started feeling this weird pull slash parental influence from my mom of, oh, you should have a base, this, that, and the other. So I did go back to the US for about a year, and it was my base again in 2022 to 2023. And it felt weird. Maybe it was the community that I was a part of. Maybe it was me, maybe all the above. And then I started feeling pulled already like 3 to 6 months in, like on several levels, this wasn't the best decision for me. So since 2023 now, mid 2023, I've been traveling full time again.
That's incredible. On everyone's journey, you make a decision not really knowing the outcome. Can you give me a time where you just went for it?
Oh my God, so many. So many. I mean, it's usually so my default is usually like, yes, cannonball in, like all in, like no fear. And that's actually how I learned to swim. Like my dad like knew me, my soul so well. He like dropped me in the pool and was like, swim. And I didn't cry, I didn't react. And I know a lot of kids, like my brother, is polar opposite. So to your point, I said, yes to The Apprentice. I said yes to moving from Houston to Oklahoma, when I worked for Conoco. I said yes to, New York. I said yes to um, moving to Atlanta. I said yes to so many friendships, different relationships, different experiences. And then I said yes to, packing up all my stuff in storage step by step, which, by the way, I had my passport, but it was expiring in less than 6 months. And I had expedited it, but I still didn't have it a week before leaving. But I had faith it was coming, and I got it like a day and a half in advance. But in any event, like it's, my business, was a total leap of faith, and it continues to be a leap of faith of, like you said, it's, you talk about this, the unknown. Yes. Today I knew I have a podcast recording, with Jeremy. Yes, this is my priority of what I'm doing. If you would have told me a year ago, would also be creating AI agents as part of my creator, school, as part of the courses, I would have told you you're crazy. But again, that's saying yes to, I want to learn this. This is an opportunity I see that can add to me, enrich me, enrich others, serve others in countless ways. So it's funny that you asked me like about what have I said yes to, and like the leaps, because actually lately more and more I'm challenging myself to say no, to increase stability, to increase slowing down, to increase more slow travel. Like this year looked radically different from last year, and next year already is going to be very different than this year.
I appreciate that you said no, saying no to things, because I think a lot of times when you are that yes and you do have that curiosity to explore and learn, sometimes I think we bog ourselves down with, sometimes it's just hypotheticals. Other times it is the actual commitments we make to, to others or to ourselves. But I think there is power in saying no sometimes as well.
Oh, 1,000%. I love that you said that and affirmed that. Thank you. And I'm a reformed people pleaseaholic. Like when I was in corporate and what I, talked about my journey, a lot of that was burnout and a lot of that was saying yes to things that didn't align to me. And then resenting others when really it was my decision, to say yes to those things. And and there's levels and layers. Like I still learn all the time. Like when I was back in Atlanta in 2021, I said yes to 2 to 3 things that I realized within less than 6 months, like, no, this is not for me.
I appreciate that. Title of the podcast, Into the Unknown. What are you working on now?
So what I'm working on now is creator brand projects with CMO/CFO type work, creator school that also anyone listening can get free previews into courses, into AI agents, into health, wealth, and business tools, and then creator retreats.
Where can people find you to learn more?
The easiest I would probably say is at Katrina Julia Fit on Instagram. And from there, you can find everything once you click the link or explore on my page.
Well, Katrina, I want to say thank you again for taking the time to talk with me. I really enjoyed hearing more about your story.
Thank you so much. I'm super grateful. And I love what you're doing with sharing stories of different people all around the world and different challenges and different things that we all face in this journey of being human.
We'll talk soon.
Thanks so much.
That was another fun episode of Into the Unknown. I truly appreciate you taking the time to listen. And if it provides you any value or entertainment, I would love if you shared it with others, liked, subscribed, and really just help the podcast grow. Again, tell a friend, tell a foe, just anyone who might enjoy hearing some stories of people's own journeys and what got them to where they are today. Till next time.